Welcome, adventurer, to another episode of A New Adventure Begins. In the last episode, we looked at how to create your character. In this episode, we're going to learn the basics of how to play D&D. So, grab your character sheet and let's get started. You enter into a tavern. It's dingy. There's lanterns on the wall with the flames flickering at you. There's empty tables scattered around the tavern and a bar right in front of you. There's a bartender there with large mutton chops and a flat cap, and he's wiping down some glasses and wiping down the bar. I'd like to look around. Roll a perception check. Natural one. With that roll, the exhaustion that you're feeling is just far too much, and you don't really take note of much except from just what's in the bar. You just see the bar in front of you. I want to go over and I want to check the fireplace. You make your way over to the fireplace, and the fireplace is crackling. The flames are crackling away, and then the logs are there. There's a large, worn leather chair sitting in front of the fireplace. And as you approach, there's a small gnome who's sitting there reading a newspaper with a big bulbous nose so long that it's actually touching the paper as he reads. As you approach, he pulls the corners of the newspaper down and looks up at you. "What do you want?" I say to the gnome, "You're in my seat." "No, go away, this is mine." I smack him. Roll initiative. As mentioned in episode 1, D&D is about using your imagination to create a world to play in. The creating is not your job as a player. This is the job of the DM or Dungeon Master, who will work tirelessly to create a world for you to explore and expand, and they will fill it with all manner of NPCs, non-player characters, for you to meet, interact with, or work together with depending on your decisions. From the little skit that you saw at the start, which I must say was incredibly acted, alright, it's not going to win me any BAFTAs, but I don't attest to being an actor. You saw the basics of how a game is played. Something I'm always telling my players when we're playing, and I'll tell anybody who may be interested in playing D&D, that the DM is telling a story. You're just acting out that story and expanding it, allowing the story to continue on. So a DM will describe what's happening, sometimes in great detail, or sometimes they want you to work to find out what happens. Let's take our scene. The DM described the scene of the tavern in quite good detail, but the rogue wanted more information about what he could see, hinting for the DM to describe more. But the DM didn't want to give it all away, so he got the player to roll a perception check. This was to see if there was anything the player could see that the DM hadn't described. A shadowy figure in the corner, or maybe a hidden door in the back of the tavern. Our player rolled a d20, I'll explain the dice a wee bit later, and rolled a natural 1, a critical failure, which means he sees nothing out of the ordinary. Usually we'll say that he's staring at his feet or just not paying attention. Now usually a rogue would have very good perception because of the class, however, if you roll a natural 1, nothing can be added to stop it being a failure. So they see absolutely nothing. Then the other player does something which makes the DM have to think. They mention something that has not been described by the DM. They want to go to the fireplace. This is the player assuming that the tavern like this would have a roaring fire, so the DM now has to decide if there's a fire or not. Now the DM could have got the player to roll a perception check to see if there was a fireplace in the tavern, giving them the chance to decide if there is one or not. But in this case, the DM agreed to let him go over to the fireplace. There, he introduced an NPC, a gnome mindlessly reading a newspaper. But the player, playing a barbarian, notorious for hitting things and asking questions later, decided to tell the gnome to move. The DM decided to see where this was going and see if it would open up a new branch of dialogue, which could lead to potential leads. But instead, the barbarian wanted to fight. The DM called for an initiative roll. More on this later. You saw that the DM got frustrated at this. This is because chances are the tavern was meant to be a site for relaxation, or even somewhere for them to get a quest. But now the chances are they're going to get kicked out of the tavern, meaning that they've lost any potential leads. Let's talk about the dice. D&D can be very overwhelming when it comes to playing the game. That's because everything that is required to play the game, the books, the character sheets, and of course, the dice. But the dice can be your best friend in a game of D&D, or your worst enemy, depending on how they roll. There are 6 dice in total, and when we talk about them, we call them D, and then how many sides the dice has got. For example, the main dice you'll be using is a D20, because it has 20 sides. Still with me? Good. So the main dice that you'll have to use is the D20. This is 1 dice to rule them all, and you will use this to make your decisions. So you would roll the D20 when asked to make a check, and then add any modifiers on your character sheet relevant to that check. You would also use it to initiate initiative, start a fight, and to see if your attack hits. I will do a whole episode on fighting in D&D later on, as there's a lot to cover. The rest of the dice are D12, D10, D8, D6, also known as a Monopoly dice, and D4. These dice are used mainly in battle for the damage added on by a weapon. So for now, ignore those dice, and we'll cover them all later in the fighting episode. So going back to our scenario, what if the rogue had rolled a 20 on his D20? We call this a natural 20. Then he would have seen everything in the tavern, from the bar to the fireplace, to the 3 wizards in the corner playing cards. The DM would be forced to describe the scene in great detail, allowing the players to decide where they go from there. But what if he'd rolled a 10, but the rogue has a +5 to their perception? That would be a 15, and that would still be a success, but the description would not be as detailed as that of a D20. You see a bar, a fireplace, and some strangers surrounding tables, but you don't really know what they're doing. The DM will have what's called a DC, or difficulty class, a number that the player must beat in order for the task to be a success. So usually, the basic DC for a perception check is 10, straight down the middle, but sometimes the DC might be harder to hit because of extenuating circumstances, such as low light or a crowded room. Or if the DM wants to make it more difficult for the players to achieve something. Sometimes a player might have something that may help with a task, so can roll advantage. This is when you roll 2 D20 and take the highest number. This means there's a higher chance that you will achieve the task that you're trying to do. Or you may have more difficulty to achieve something. You don't know how to do it, so you'll be asked to roll with disadvantage. To roll 2 D20 and take the lowest number, making it more difficult to hit the DC. This is when things get exciting, as it means that you are truly at the mercy of the dice, and she can be a cruel mistress. Remember, as long as the dice allows, nothing in D&D is impossible. If you wanted to steal jewellery from a stall in the marketplace, for example, and you rolled a D20 and got a 7, and your sleight of hand modifier is -4, then you would be caught and probably arrested depending on how the DM is feeling. But if you rolled a 7 and your modifier was +4, that would be 11, which technically that is a success, but a very shady one. You manage to steal the piece of jewellery, but you knock over half of the display in the process, making the stall owner very suspicious of you, and you may have to roll a deception check to deceive them into thinking they imagined the whole thing. So, let's recap. D&D is about telling a story of your own making, but the DM is the storyteller. You're guiding the story with your actions. Those actions are decided with the roll of a dice, a D20, remembering to add on your modifiers to increase the number unless it's a 1, a critical failure, or a 20, a critical success. The main thing is to have fun. D&D is about having fun and spending time with your friends. Dungeons & Dragons is a place where ironically people can be themselves playing someone else, if that makes sense. The campaign that I run as a DM I play online. It has allowed me to get back in touch with a dear friend with whom I lost contact with over 20 years ago, and now we chat every week, as if the time apart never happened. And I've met some awesome people along the way. So no matter if you picked up D&D really quickly or struggle with it at first, the most important thing is to have fun. Join me next time, guys, when we'll be going over initiative and having battles in D&D. If you found this series helpful so far and are enjoying the useful tips, then please consider subscribing to the channel. It's totally free to do so, and turn on notifications to be told when the next episode is up. Also leave a like. This will allow like-minded people in the D&D community to find this video, and someone else may even find it useful. Thanks very much for watching, Adventurer. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.